My name is Ann Sermons Gillis, and I'm Vice President of the Theosophical Order of Service. Today, I'm very happy to have with me the leader and probably founder of the Charlotte Group, as well
Yes.
as the president of the Mid-South Federation. I want to welcome Mark Brooks. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Ann. How are you? And thank you for having me.
Oh, great. Now, was I right? Or aren't you the founder of the Charlotte Group? Was that
Yes,
correct?
one of the four.
Okay, great. When did y'all do that?
It was after a Mid-South Federation conference at which we were instructed to start forming a group in Charlotte because there were so many of us at the Mid-South.
Ah,
So it was good, and we got started and had four people who were consistent members and got our charter and went from there. And so now we have about 8 or 9 people that come regularly.
oh, that is great. And we're going to go back to the very beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in eastern North Carolina in Moore County, close to Pinehurst. And then when I was a year and a half, my dad got a job in western North Carolina, and we moved up close to Asheville, and that's where I grew up. I grew up in a little textile and furniture mill town of about 6,500 people,
Oh,
and
what was the name
uh,
of that town?
Marion.
Marion. Okay.
And it got hit pretty hard when they had the outsourcing of the textile and furniture business offshore. They It took them probably 10 years to recover from that because everyone in my hometown would go work in the mills when they were a teenager, and they would get early release from school, and they would go work with their brothers and sisters, aunts, uncles, mother, father, and all their family out there. And just to tell you how bad it was, is when I was a sophomore in 10th grade and went to high school, we had 776 students in the sophomore class. It was the largest class our high school had had. But when I graduated as a senior, we had 370.
Wow.
And that's how many people dropped out. And when they dropped out, they didn't finish their high school degree. So when the textile mills closed and the furniture mills closed, they didn't have a lot of education. So it was hard to attract new business. And so they suffered for about 10 years doing that. But they've recovered pretty well now.
Oh, good. I remember I grew up in North Carolina myself, before you did, but textile, I think they were like four tobacco textiles, and I don't remember the other two. They're big uh, economic indicators.
Yes, in the 1980s, about half of the textiles in the United States was made in North Carolina.
Yeah, amazing. Well, so you moved away from where you lived, and where do you live now?
I live in Charlotte now. When I graduated from high school, I went to Raleigh to North Carolina State University. When I got out of NC State, I went to Manhattan and worked there for 18 years. And the company I was working for while I was in Manhattan, they opened an office in Charlotte, and they had a relocation package for people to move to Charlotte. And so I was one of the people who took it, one of the first ones to take it. And so I like to tell people they paid me to come home.
Oh, that
So
is cute.
So until I moved to Charlotte, it was a 12 and a half hour drive from upstate New York to get to my home in Marion. But after I moved to Charlotte, it became an hour and a half drive. And so it was much better. I got to see family much more often.
Oh, you might almost think that's the law of attraction, bringing you back, pulling you
Yeah,
back.
there you go. It was good.
Were you raised in a religion?
Yes, Southern Baptist
Oh,
in the
right.
Christian religion.
Christian religions. Well, did your parents, and I'm sure they did, that their beliefs influence you as a youngster?
They did, and I didn't really question my beliefs. I know that that was one thing that people ask a lot. I pretty much accepted, what my family or what my parents told me and what the church that I went to told me. And when I went to Manhattan, if you could believe it, there were 3 Southern Baptist churches in Manhattan, and this was before the Southern Baptist Convention became more fundamental. They called themselves moderates. They said there aren't any liberals in the Southern Baptist Convention. So it was, you were either fundamental or moderate. And I was more on the moderate side, or the churches I went to were more on the moderate side. But I met someone when I was at church in Manhattan. We got married, and her family had grown up, or she had grown up Church of Christ. And so when we moved to Charlotte, I started going to a Church of Christ church. And so I changed my denomination then. And I was involved with the Church of Christ for about 20 years.
Okay. So did your family allow questioning, or you just didn't really have any questions?
I just didn't really question.
Okay. So at some point, since you're sitting here with me today,
Yes,
there was a change of heart. Can you
yes.
tell me about that and how your your next spiritual search began and how
It
you ended up where you are now?
That's a good question. It all started when I started having spiritual experiences in the early 2000s, just after I'd moved to Charlotte. And what I mean by that is I had been talking to a friend of mine when I was up in New York, and he and I had moved to Charlotte together, so we would eat lunch often. And one time I told him, I said, you know, when I put my hands together, I can feel this pressure. And he said, oh, that's your etheric field. That's, and I said, oh, really? And then I come to find out he had studied for the ministry to be a Catholic priest and had gone all the way up to getting his orders and gone through seminary and stuff. So he was assigned a spiritual advisor and as well as an academic advisor. And so he had gotten a good dose of spirituality as part of his training. But he told me about, this pressure in my hands and taught me how to move energy around my body. And then there was another person that I knew up in New York who kind of had a dark demeanor, and I was trying to help them. So I don't know why I started doing this, but I read a book called Deliverance from Evil Spirits by Father Francis McNutt. And it was a how-to book on deliverance ministry or exorcism. And I didn't believe it and thought it was a bunch of ho-ha, or whatever Southerners would describe that. And one Saturday morning, I was lying in bed and I decided to try the commanding and stuff, and it actually worked. And so, because I was sensitized to the movement of energy in my body, I could feel these energies moving in my body. And so I started playing with that for 2 or 3 weeks. And then, after about 4 weeks of doing that, I encountered a spirit that wouldn't move, and it stayed stuck in my body, and I spent 2 or 3 weeks trying to get it out, and finally I did. But that's what got me started with spiritual experiences, and I've had that pretty much consistently since 2003. But I've kind of made peace with it all. At first I thought every spirit was an evil spirit, and then I just said, I've been putting too much energy into all this. I said, if you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. And it turned out a lot of them were benevolent. Almost all of them were benevolent. And that was just my own, what should I say, the way I reacted to it all. But that started me reading a lot of things, a lot of books, starting to try and find out what happened to me. And that led me to questioning my religion. It led me to an integration of my intellectual understanding of spirituality with my life experiences. And that's what led me to become more spiritual. I started writing books in the early teens and found the Theosophical Society when I was writing my third book. And I had read some books by Arthur Powell and really resonated with what he said because it was a lot of what I had experienced in my life. And that's what led me to join the Theosophical Society. And what happened after that, you pretty much know.
Well, from talking to you before, you have described yourself as left-brained.
Yes, very much
And
so.
this stuff that we're talking about is not left-brain oriented kinds of things. And I'm
Not at
wondering
all.
how that went for you since you had these experiences that were really outside of your normal awareness and awakening and thought process.
That that was very insightful. Yes, it was very disconcerting. And even today, with my books and what I've written, it's all pretty much left brain. I started out writing books to try and do a scientific perspective on what people believed in faith, because Jesus told people to believe things in faith that I would say he knew they were real. And most people still believe things in faith, but a lot of skeptics and atheists and stuff would challenge that. And everything that people believe by faith is all experiential. And they were trying to put reason and rationality behind it. And it's really hard to do. And we can talk about this later on too. But my initial books were to try and put a scientific perspective on what people believed in faith. But as I got more and more into spirituality, I started realizing that reality is different from what people believe. And that's what my later books have become
Well, would
is,
you be willing to give us the name of your books that you've written?
okay, the first two books were titled Christianity from a Different Perspective. And then the third book was Christianity from a Spiritual Perspective. And then the fourth book was, which is the latest one that's out, is called Earth's Hidden Reality. And that's the one where I talk about reality being different from what people generally believe. And that's an extension to what I initially started out to do, was to say what people believed in faith was actually real and scientific. But the real reality is that or my opinion of reality is that it's all fully wave based and there's four spatial dimensions instead of three. And I could get more and more technical into it, but it answers a lot of questions that have perplexed scientists for decades, and answers questions about the latent powers or latent abilities in humans and unexplained, what is it? Unexplained laws of nature. It's in the three objects of the Theosophical Society. But that reality is different from what people generally believe. It's so fundamental to everyone's worldviews, and even the atheist and skeptic worldviews or the scientific worldviews, the religious worldviews are all based on what I think is an incorrect view of reality. But if you say that reality is so fundamentally different, it'll wipe away what everybody believes. And the real reality, real worldview is something different from what people generally believe now, whether it's scientific or religious or paranormal.
Wow, that's great. That's a lot. So, would you
Sorry.
repeat the name of that last book slowly?
Earth's Hidden Reality.
Earth's Hidden Realities. Okay.
Yes,
If people wanted to buy these, or these,
they're up on Amazon.
pick them on Amazon. Okay, and just look up Mark Brooks, and they can get that.
Mark Hunter Brooks.
Okay, Mark
It's
Hunter.
Mark Hunter Brooks, and you'll find it.
Are you saying Hunter or Hinter?
Hunter,
Yeah, Hunter.
Hunter.
Okay. So, are there any, moving on, are there any living teachers that have influenced you?
There's been so many books that I read, I can't say there was any one. I will say Arthur Powell's books had the biggest influence on me. And I like to say that his books are gateway books into theosophy, because his five books that he wrote about the different non-physical bodies and the solar system, which talks about the process of spiritual development, they together access or reference or cite 67 other theosophical works. And so if you read Arthur Powell's books and you start searching the sites that he mentions in those books, you can go back into a number of different areas of theosophy and access them pretty quickly.
Okay, I'm slipping here.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, everything's falling out, which is fine, which is absolutely fine. How did you find theosophy? Have you told us that was that? I knew you were searching, but what was it that kind of got you to theosophy?
Well, I was searching for all these years, reading all these books, and I've read over 1,000 books, at least the introduction in chapter one and two of each book, so that I know whether I should read the entire book or not. But when I found the Theosophical books and found Arthur Powell's books and started following the citations of what he mentioned, I realized that there was a lot of truth in what he said, and there was a lot of discussions from a scientific perspective of what people consider to be paranormal uh, events or abilities. But that was the one place that I'd never found that information before, and I resonated with it a lot. And that's what led me to join the Theosophical Society. But I found it when I was working on my third book, and I went back and spent 4 months rewriting, or 5 months rewriting four chapters of my book before I published it,
Oh,
to
wow.
to include all the things that Theosophy said about what was going on. Because if you just look at the books in general that are out there, they don't go into the detail that the theosophical books do.
Gotcha.
And you get so much more detail and it's so much more granular. And it's done by clairvoyance. It's done by people who have these abilities and they don't go on any one person's statement. You have to have two people or more people to verify or validate what's going on. And then they have to reference a teacher or an instructor or someone else who's had that experience to validate it. So they tried to do as much as they could to validate the accuracy of the things they talked about. Excuse me.
Theosophy does well on explaining the how,
It
which
does.
most religions do not explain the how. They just say, this is the way it is, take it or leave it.
Well, and I was going to say the three objects of the Theosophical Society is the only place where I've seen a discussion of science, philosophy, religion, comparative religion studies, as well as the unexplained activities. And well, I don't know why I can't get that. The unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity. It's the only organization that links all five of those together. And if you've ever heard of the parable of the six blind men and the elephant, uh, if you haven't heard it, for the people that are watching this, reference it online. But the Theosophical Society is talking about all the things that you really need to reference to understand reality fully. And most people have a religious interpretation of it, or a scientific interpretation of it, or a philosophical interpretation of it. And you get parts of the story, but you don't get the entire story. And the entire understanding of reality only comes when you understand all these different components and can balance them with each other and have them integrate with each other. That's when you really get a full understanding of reality. And I know some teachers say, know yourself, know who you are, what you believe, what you stand for. You can do all that, but it's just as important to understand what's real about reality. Why are we here? Why is the universe here? And answer those questions of life. And it's when you can do all that that all these pieces start falling into place and you start understanding things from a different perspective. And that was kind of going back to my books. That's why I said Christianity from a different perspective, is because you have to have all these different views to fully understand what's going on the planet.
Sometimes it's important that we ask the right questions,
Yes.
because if
Excuse
there's no curiosity there, it's hard to get to what reality is or to get to the truth if there's not this yearning to see what really is happening. And I
Right.
think maybe one of the ways when life is empty, it's like my perception and experience of reality must be off because I'm miserable. There must be something else.
Right.
So it sounds like you've really delved into this
Excuse me.
experience of reality, which is more really of an experience rather than an evaluation. We tend to evaluate reality rather than experience it. Um,
Right.
Reality probably is wordless in my experience. Um, then I'm
Right.
going to say something about it, but it starts out as wordless, the experience. So we're going to move on to the idea of altruism and service. Of course, one of the cornerstones of theosophy is service. Fanny
Hmm.
Besant started the Theosophical Order of Service, so it could be the action arm of theosophy. So I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about service?
I uh, I believe that service and altruism, which is a real important part of theosophy, it's an action-oriented part of theosophy. There's an intellectual side of theosophy, but I see the Theosophical Order of Service being the action side of it. It's to act in what you believe and understand. And I also think there's a continuum to altruism, or the whole concept of altruism is, why do you choose to volunteer your time, or why do you choose to give things to people who have insecurities in their life, either shelter insecurities or clothing or food insecurities. Why do you do that? And I was thinking when I was growing up in the mountains of North Carolina, my family was very involved, as well as the whole community in Marion and the surrounding areas of Western North Carolina, very involved in volunteerism and helping people and sharing with people what they have. And so I grew up with a volunteer spirit because my family had that. So you have a family influence on your sense of volunteerism. But then, like when I went to Manhattan, I'm pretty proud of saying this. I went to Manhattan without knowing anybody when I graduated from college, and I was able to stay there for 18 years. And the first thing I did was join a church. And everything that that church did, I was always there. And that's what helped me build a community with people that I didn't know until I had this common, theme with them or a common point where we can spend time with each other. But I developed relationships and developed a community without knowing anybody going into this big city. And so many people find it difficult, if not impossible, to do. But if you build a community, that makes it a lot easier to survive in a place like New York or any of the larger cities in the country.
So
But going,
you went
well,
from
I
you
was
went
going to say going back to altruism is I said, your family influences you initially, but when I first went to Manhattan, I was doing a lot of volunteerism for a sense of community, to be with people, other people who were doing volunteering their time and their abilities and their treasures and stuff. And then later on, as you do work with other people and people who don't have things, you do derive a sense of pleasure from being able to share things with them and for people who are suffering to help make them happy. So there's this pleasure derived from volunteering your time and giving people things. But it's after you get involved in uh, the theosophical aspects of things, or the religious aspects, or the spiritual aspects of your life, you start developing this sense of wanting to do things um, for a love for others or for a sense of higher purpose, that we're all one, and you start doing that. That's when those things come in. But I wanted to say it's all a continuum. Altruism, you have different reasons for your altruism depending on where you are at what stage in your life. And coming back to theosophy and its insistence on independence of thought and not accepting what someone else believes or some dogma or doctrine or whatever. It's important because everyone's at a different stage in their continuum of not only altruism, but of spirituality and their own search for what they believe about themselves and about the world.
absolutely. That's well said, Mark. Thank you. Yeah, that it is a continuum, and the way that we serve changes. I think that's what you said, according to where we are in our spiritual journey.
It does.
Yeah, you moved from a small town in North Carolina, more almost rural, so small, to Manhattan, which is, one of the busiest cities in the world, probably. And you were able to carry this sense of altruism there. Do you think
Yes.
that it's harder in some places to serve uh, and be altruistic than it is in others, or do you think that's an individual preference and choice?
Well, that's a good question. I think there's people in need anywhere you go. Uh, but in Manhattan, it's hard for someone to hide their need. You have homeless people out on the streets, they're right in your face all the time. And the sense of need is greater than your ability to resolve that need. The church I went to, they had to put a limit on how many people they would serve at their food pantry each week or at their clothes closet each week, because they would run out of food or they would run out of clothes or clothing, and they had to limit it. And that was one of the things that was really hard for people that went to this church to understand initially, was to put a limit on things. But I was going to say in the rural areas, in Western North Carolina where I grew up, you could be poverty stricken, you could be homeless, you could have all these things going on, but you could hide yourself. you could hide in the woods or hide in these places, out of the way places where most people don't go. So it's a lot harder in these rural areas or smaller areas to know or to see people who have needs. And I know that's one of the important things about people sharing in these small communities is that you find out about people who have these needs and you help resolve them. But it's harder to see them just unless you know about them in these small communities as opposed to Manhattan, where it's just right in your face and it's overwhelming the needs that people have and the variety of needs that people have.
That is a very good insight. I used to live in a fairly affluent area in near Houston called the Woodlands,
Uh-huh.
and they had buddy backpacks for children
Hmm.
in that were in the school. And it's like, you mean there are people here that need help that don't have enough food? And it says, yes, absolutely. It was like they were invisible. We didn't
Yes.
see them, but when they went to school and they were hungry, they were noticed. It's like, have you
Yes.
had anything to eat? No, we don't eat on the weekends. We only eat when we can come to school and get a school lunch. So yeah,
Yeah. And I see questionnaires like at medical facilities, they ask about food insecurities or shelter insecurities and stuff. So it's just wherever you have a chance to interface with people, be it at school or be it at the doctor, you see these questionnaires popping up to try and find people who are not, what should I say, they're hidden, like you were saying, but they don't pop up as being in need, but yet they do have those real needs.
have you had any chance yet to have any TOS projects in Charlotte in your group?
I have not, but I intend to.
Yay!
Yes, we will.
There are so many different things you can do. What aspects do you feel like have influenced your life as far as theosophical principles? What really turns you on? What got you going, or what still keeps you going?
Well, just the wealth of information that the Theosophical Society has. I like to say that the Theosophical Society has the best knowledge base of the non-physical worlds that is available, one of the best in the world, if not the best in the world. And that's what drew me to it. But some of the works I know by Jiddu Krishnamurti, At the Feet of the Father. Let me make sure I get the thing. At the
Master,
feet
at
of
the
the
feet of
master,
master,
excuse
yeah.
me, at the feet of the master. Very simple words, but very profound in what he says about the steps that you need to be aware of, the things you need to do and be aware of in these final steps of your walk on earth or your path on earth. And the Theosophical Society takes a much broader view of reality, of religion and mixed with science, more so than other groups do. And that's one aspect of it that I like. I mean, I've really embraced the Theosophical Society and the things that it does and shares with people.
So it seems like in theosophy, you were able to have a place to put your spiritual experiences and they made sense. And you were able to feed your intellect because you do have a very curious need to know everything that's going on. And it seems like it covered both the bases. Is that correct?
That's correct. But going back to that third object of the Theosophical Society, exploring the powers latent in humanity and the unexplained laws of nature, that's more experiential. So, in the second object with a comparative religion study, uh, well, not comparative, but just philosophy and science, you have the intellectual side, but you have the experiential side as well. And I think you need both of those to really have that full picture. And that's what I've found with the Theosophical Society that I haven't found with any other group. And that's one of the things I like about it so much, as well as its independence of thought, which I think is very important because everybody's at a different stage in their walk in life. And you can't tell somebody, well, this is the way it is. And to them, it's just words. They have to have that intellectual understanding as well as the life experiences to balance it, to understand what's really going on and develop their own sense of wisdom, which is unique to each person.
I've heard it said that it's a sin to destroy someone's life-sustaining illusions. And it's like, that's what I've hear you saying in a way is like, that's what they've got going on now. Don't take that away. Let them grow.
Absolutely. And I like to say, I don't care where you are in your spiritual walk, if you're in the gutter on the left-hand side or in the gutter on the right-hand side, as long as you're moving along the path, that's what's important because everyone is going to be trying to figure out what's going on, and not everyone has a roadmap to go with it. But as long as you're searching, you're going to find the right path eventually. And I think that's what's important, is not to become complacent or not to throw your hands up and walk away, or not to just say, I'm here to enjoy life and go out to the lake and go swimming and water skiing and picnicking and not think anything about spirituality at all.
Yes, that's very well said. Could you tell me how the Federation meetings have influenced your life? Have you gotten anything from attending the Federation meetings?
Well, I've gotten to meet Theosophists from the Southeast, and that's been important. And actually, that's what led me to become more involved with the Theosophical Society. That's how we started the Charlotte group, was through the Midsouth Federation. Um, so I got the start in Charlotte through the Federation, and meeting people from all over the Southeast was a big help. And I saw you there, I
Yeah.
believe, in past meetings. Uh, Summer National in Wheaton, Illinois, going up there and meeting people too. I made contacts with people, but it's good to know that you can meet people and talk to people on a different spiritual level. And I think you find that here with the Theosophical Society that you wouldn't find, or find it hard to get the same experience elsewhere.
So what you're saying basically is the foundation has been the community, and that showed you where to go and how to collect it. And synchronicity happening probably with you forming whatever you decided to do.
It's been the community, but also to the spiritual experiences that they've had, and filling in the gaps of my knowledge and understanding and stuff. When I talk to them about things that I've experienced and things that I believe and what I'm thinking about and trying to figure out, they've been very helpful.
So they've been living teachers. It's like living teachers are everywhere.
They have, and the people in the Charlotte Study Center group, they've been very helpful too. And it's it's interesting how varied their perspectives are and their backgrounds, and what's led them to have certain beliefs and understandings, which are different from mine. And that's all good.
Do you still have family members that are living?
I have a sister in Marion, and her three kids and four grandkids.
Have you expressed any of your spiritual beliefs to them? And if so, anything about theosophy?
I have tried, but they're not at that level. They're not at the point to where they can understand it.
Great.
And I've heard one way someone said it, it's not a no, it's a not yet. They're a not yet. They're not at the point to where they could really comprehend what I'm trying to say to them. And let alone, I mean, not only theosophy, but about my books and what I've written about too. They don't understand that because they have more of a pure religious background or religious understanding of it. And they really need to have so much more to understand what I've been doing.
Well, my father, who died many, many years ago, once said, because I was writing a spiritual newsletter, and he said, I don't understand what you're doing. He says, but you don't have to understand people to be able to love them.
There you go.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying. What you're saying is you're not saying they're wrong. You're saying that they're just at a different place in their spiritual journey than you are.
And they're just as passionate on that too. I mean, they're very passionate about their beliefs and their understandings, and that in Marion as well, and in the surrounding communities. When Hurricane Helene hit Western North Carolina, the church that I went to in Marion was a staging area for volunteer groups to go to Western North Carolina. They were a depot with supplies for people, and they stocked up their fellowship hall and other rooms in the church building and stuff but they had people use that for months afterwards to help do volunteerism efforts in Western North Carolina for people.
Yes, I've found that sometimes people have very different beliefs than me. For example, I have a friend who was a flat earther, but he helped me he volunteered to help me do a lot of things, and our beliefs were radically different about some things, but we could still be compatible even if we had different beliefs. Uh, I wonder if you have been able to say everything we were talking earlier before the interview about reality. Were you able to say everything about reality that you wanted to say?
If I said more, it would get too down in the weeds. I think
Okay.
it'd be good for this conversation to say
Okay, so if
let it
somebody
go for
wants to
that,
talk to you, but they better come to the Mid-South and
or read my book,
yeah, there you
read
go.
my last book,
Your last book.
and
And
maybe my fifth book. So I've been putting together ideas and thoughts on that, but my fifth book's going to be a little more definitive and declarative as to what things are.
okay. Well, now, are you employed now? Or are you retired?
I'm retired. I'm a full-time author, if you want to say that.
Okay.
Author, speaker,
Retired from the first place, retired from the first place.
yes.
Do you have you have mentioned some books other than your own books? Do you have any other books that you would recommend? You mentioned At the Feet of the Master and Powell's books. Do you have any other? I know you've read a lot. Any specifically that really stand out, especially for a beginning theosophist?
Well, that's what I was going to say. For the beginners, John Algio's An Introduction to Theosophy. You can find that online in a PDF form. And then I want to say The Hidden Gateway. I forget who that author is. I keep wanting to say Algio, but I know it's not him. It's somebody else. But those are two very good books to get started with theosophy. And Arthur Powell's books on the non-physical bodies are good to give you an understanding of these non-physical worlds. And the Solar System book by Arthur Powell talking about spiritual development. One thing that's interesting about the Solar System book is it says every planet in the solar system is involved in spiritual development, not just the Earth. Because you can have multiple non-physical dimensions, you can have life going on in non-physical dimensions in every planet in the solar system. And Powell outlines that in his book. I don't know how he got the information or where he got it, but or I guess he got it from other theosophical books. But it's very interesting what he laid out there, and you
Well,
don't find that anywhere else. I've
yeah,
never found that
Blavatsky
anywhere
did.
else.
Blavatsky did talk about that, about how we're the kind of evolution of consciousness in the form. She does talk about that. I don't remember her saying something about all the other planets, but I do remember her talking about it for the Earth, and us being
Yes,
here.
yes.
That's wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. It's been wonderful to talk with you. And any final words or goodbyes?
Well, just to say thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure, and I'm very touched that you offered to do this interview for me. Appreciate it very much, and thank you.